My name is Mike Wilson. Until that night, I thought my life was pretty good, but everything I loved was taken or threatened to be taken from me overnight. Yet I survived. Over the years, I found solace in one Bible verse. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skilled, but time and chance happen to them all. I married Jenny Smith 3 months after college graduation. 7 years later, she betrayed me completely. Reflecting on our marriage, I found no warning signs. Jenny was very attractive, 5'6" with blonde hair and green eyes. She wasn't wealthy, but to me, she was perfect. A 9 or 9.5 on a scale of 1 to 10. Her charm drew people in, and she captivated me from our first hello. We seemed to fit together perfectly, sharing similar goals, or so I thought. We dated and eventually got married. If Jenny was a 9.5 with great charm, I was an 8.5, the strong, silent type. I'm 5'8", 190 pounds, with sandy brown hair. I had an active social life in high school and college, with my share of relationships. Though not a sports or movie star, I occasionally caught the eye of women. Jenny and I met in a college statistics class. We quickly became inseparable. Before graduation, I landed a good job, and our future looked bright. One red flag was Jenny's reluctance to introduce me to her parents, John and Alma. After the wedding, I discovered she was embarrassed by her family's poverty, but they were wonderful people, warm, compassionate, and generous. I grew to love them as my own parents since mine had passed away. They lived in a modest house in a not-so-great neighborhood, but it was well-maintained and clean. Jenny's neglect of her parents saddened me, but mentioning it always led to arguments. So I kept in touch with them, calling weekly and helping when I could. For instance, when John's lawnmower broke and he couldn't afford to fix it, I bought a used one for him, pretending it was my old one. He gratefully accepted. My job as a staff accountant at a large manufacturing firm paid well. The accounting department, though small, handled all operations for the company's businesses. 3 years in, 2 events boosted my career. Our department manager retired, and I passed the CPA exam. After 2 failed attempts to hire from outside, I was promoted to head the accounting department with a 6-figure salary. This made Jenny happy, as we could now afford a bigger house and nicer cars. Shortly after the wedding, Jenny became pregnant and we had twins, a girl and a boy. Initially, Jenny was unhappy, feeling it was too soon and wanting to travel first. I was ecstatic. Fortunately, once the twins, Glenda and Mark, were born, Jenny became a wonderful mother. She stayed home for 5.5 years, then got a job as an administrative assistant at a law firm when the kids started kindergarten. I worried she might be led astray, but her boss, Clem Flint, was a devoted Christian with a solid family life. Our marriage seemed strong until the 6th year when Jenny became increasingly unhappy. One day, after she lashed out at Glenda, I confronted her. "What's going on, Jenny? You didn't need to snap at her. It was just a plate." Jenny started to cry. "I'm just so depressed. I feel like my life is passing me by. I feel like I'm just somebody's wife or mommy. There are so many places I want to visit and things we can't afford. My life is crap." I was shocked and suggested counseling, which she angrily rejected. "I'm not crazy. I just want to live a better life." Jenny's mood swings made our home life tense. Sometimes she'd lose her temper, and other times, we'd be a loving family. I thought it was a rough patch, but I loved Jenny and our kids, so I tried to shield them from her mood swings and reassured them of her love. On weekends, I took Mark and Glenda on outings. Jenny sometimes joined us, but often didn't. The kids loved their happy mom on trips, but were relieved to leave their unhappy mom at home. Things were tense until a 4th of July picnic my company hosted. Surprisingly, Jenny enjoyed it, and afterward, her mood improved, and our life got back on track. Then came the New Year's Eve party at my company's office, and my life changed dramatically. Jenny, who usually didn't want to go, insisted this time, saying she missed dancing. This was odd since Jenny wasn't fond of dancing, but I agreed. At the party, I was surprised to see our company owner, Brad Colson. He usually only attended the 4th of July picnic. It was at the last picnic that Jenny first met him. Everyone was surprised to see him at the New Year's party, as he typically only participated in volleyball and softball games during the summer event. Once Jenny settled in, I went to get us drinks. When I returned, the music started, and Brad asked Jenny to dance. They danced through several songs before he brought her back to our table. When I suggested Jenny dance with me, she said she needed to rest. But half an hour later, she eagerly danced 5 more songs with Brad. I only managed to get 2 dances with her before she claimed she was tired again. 15 minutes before midnight, Brad returned, and Jenny took his hand without even looking at me. I was furious, but didn't want to make a scene in front of my boss. I decided to talk to Jenny at home. As midnight approached, I looked for Jenny to kiss her at the stroke of midnight. To my shock, I saw Brad kiss her on the lips. I stormed over, pulled Brad away, and shouted, "Leave my wife alone, you fool!" The room fell silent as everyone stared at us. I didn't care if Brad was my boss. He had crossed the line. My heart raced, and I was ready for a confrontation. But Brad just smirked. Through clenched teeth, I said, "Jenny, it's time to go home." When I reached for her hand, she pulled away. "Mike, I'm sorry," Jenny said, holding Brad's hand. "But I'm going with Brad tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." I was too stunned to respond. Brad and Jenny left, and everyone stared at me. Humiliated, I went home. The next morning, I woke with the worst hangover of my life after a night of crying and drinking. I was enraged and plotted revenge on Brad, but quickly discarded any plans that could land me in jail. After 3 hours, I managed to control my headache and called the babysitter, telling her I'd pick up Mark and Glenda soon. Paranoia set in. What if Jenny decided not to come back? I rushed to get the kids before Jenny could. The kids were happy to see me, but asked where their mom was. Holding back tears, I lied and said she had to go on a trip. They were disappointed until I suggested going to IHOP for pancakes. While they ate, I made 2 lists, one for fixing things and one for planning a divorce. Back home, I was relieved and disappointed that Jenny wasn't there. I wanted to fix things, but feared my reaction. Then I saw the answering machine blinking. It was a message from Jenny, saying it was best to postpone our conversation for a week. She explained that Brad needed a secretary for a business trip, and she was filling in. Jenny turned out to be full of lies. The only person she was filling in for was Brad. I threw away my list of ways to reconcile. The emotional pain was worse than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. Betrayal by someone you love and trust is indescribable unless you've been through it. I understood how people could go insane and do terrible things. I dismissed any thoughts of self-damage because I loved my children too much. But other dark thoughts persisted, including doubts about whether Mark and Glenda were really mine. I let the kids play in the backyard while I started planning a new life. First on my list was a DNA test. I took a kit when we went to a restaurant and collected samples. I called a friend who had gone through a divorce and asked for his ex-wife's lawyer's contact information. The lawyer, Tom Watson, was surprised but interested when I mentioned my wife's lover was Brad Colson. He scheduled a meeting for Tuesday morning and asked me to bring my financial documents and the kids. After gathering everything, I spent the day with the kids. We went to Joe's Pizza and I mailed the DNA test. The results confirmed the kids were mine, which was a huge relief. The next morning, I called work to take the week off and went to Tom Watson's office with the kids. Tom's office was large, and he was very understanding and compassionate. He listened as I told him how Jenny had left me for my boss on New Year's Eve. Tom showed me a picture of his cousin, Abby Colson, who had been married to Brad's brother, Joe. Joe cheated on Abby, and Tom represented her in the divorce. Although he was outmatched by Brad's lawyers, he eventually got the judgment partially reversed. Tom promised to fight hard for me, despite knowing Brad would bring his lawyers against us. "That's enough for me," I said firmly. "Let's get started." I suddenly felt good that someone was on my side, and that I could finally fight back. For the next 3 hours, we reviewed all the papers, discussed what to expect, and Tom asked what I really wanted. I said, "I want the house, half the property, an untouched pension, no alimony, and no child support." Tom replied, "You might need to temper your expectations, but I'll fight for all that. Do you want full custody?" I clarified, "If Jenny doesn't want the kids, then yes, I want them. But I think joint custody is fair, since she loves them too." Tom warned, "She's likely to get primary custody, especially if she marries Brad. He has the resources to make her a stay-at-home mom. You might get liberal visitation rights, but they might fight that too." "That sucks," I said angrily. "I didn't do anything wrong, but I'll end up losing." Tom added, "If she marries Brad, you won't pay child support, but we'll still owe alimony. I'll gladly pay child support just to see my kids." At the final meeting, Tom spoke to Mark and Glenda and was impressed by their love for me. He said, "Your kids love you so much, though they love their mom too, just not as much." I left feeling better financially, but worried about time with my kids. Tom said he would draft a divorce and temporary custody petition. We planned to serve Jenny after her business trip. Jenny called and asked to talk, so I arranged for the kids to be elsewhere. I no longer had illusions about reconciling. Our marriage was over. When Jenny arrived, I struggled to contain my emotions. I got a beer and sat at the table. Jenny asked about the kids, and I nearly snapped. "So now you're worried about them?" I said. Jenny quickly reassured me. "I thought our meeting would be ugly after New Year's Eve. I'm sorry for that. Brad convinced me it was better to let you cool off, and he was right. After the trip, I realized he was my soulmate." "Soulmate? Convenient, he's super rich," I said sarcastically. "Let's talk about the divorce so I can stop wasting my time." Jenny got angry. "You don't have to be rude. I don't care what you think." "Then leave," I said, heading to the backyard. But Jenny insisted we finish the conversation. She handed me an envelope. The terms were generous until I read the last paragraph. I threw the papers at her. "Tell Brad to shove this proposal. I will never consent to him adopting my children. Offering $100,000 for consent is despicable." "Mike, we can offer the kids a better life," Jenny argued. "Screw you and your husband," I retorted. "It'll be better for the kids," she continued. "They'll have better opportunities in travel. Brad is willing to pay you $250,000 for the adoption." "No way," I said. "This conversation is over." "Jenny, you're not just a total strumpet, but also an idiot. What part of screw yourself and your soulmate don't you understand?" "I'm sure Brad will increase his offer to $500,000, Jenny quickly replied. "That's probably more money than you'll ever have. We were barely making ends meet on your salary. Don't forget Brad is your employer. Your job could disappear in an instant. Even if he offered $100 million, I wouldn't take it." I was on the verge of doing something stupid and needed to calm down. I glanced at the clock and turned back to Jenny. "I've had time to reflect on our marriage, and it's not pretty. You may think you have a golden kitty, but you don't. We had a good marriage for a while, but for the last year, you've been a terrible wife, mom, and person. We weren't just making ends meet. You always spent more than necessary because you wanted the best of everything. I don't need Brad's crumbs, and if he plans to fire me, I'll go to the EEOC right now. The court granted me custody of the kids because you abandoned them." "I didn't give up my children," she said angrily. Then the doorbell rang. "It's for you," I said, smiling as I opened the door to a sheriff's deputy. He asked, "Are you Jenny Wilson?" After she showed her ID, he handed her a summons. She read the divorce petition and ran away in tears. God, that felt good. I told Tom on my cell phone. "I hope you behaved yourself?" asked Tom. "It was difficult, but I did. Jenny left here in tears after being served. I don't know what that had to do with." "You were hardly wrong about what they'd offer. But Brad wants to adopt my kids. He can't do that, can he?" "That's unexpected," Tom admitted. "Taking away your parental rights would be extremely difficult unless they prove you're unfit. Be careful around Jenny and Brad. Stay close to people who can be witnesses. They may try to twist even innocent events to make you look bad. We'll be prepared." "Tom, does it ever get easier?" I asked, feeling the pain of Jenny leaving again. "Yes, it does," Tom replied immediately. "You're not as devastated today as the night she left. There will be good and bad days for a long time. We might lose some skirmishes with Brad and Jenny, but we'll regroup and find new ways to fight back. Keep the faith." During the week off work, I followed Tom's advice. I opened new accounts and transferred half the money. I arranged for the twins to stay at school until 5:30 p.m., giving me time to get home and do chores before putting them to bed. I established a stricter routine, making them bathe, brush their teeth, and go to bed by 8 p.m. They initially objected, but when I promised 2 bedtime stories, they began to look forward to it. Spending time with the kids became a lifesaver. We grew closer, and they didn't ask about their mom too often. But one day, Mark asked if his mom would ever come back. I didn't want to hurt them, but didn't lie either. I told them the truth. Their mom found a new man she liked better than me and wanted him to be their new daddy. They cried, and I felt awful, thinking I'd said too much. I quickly assured them that I would always be their daddy. That calmed them down, and I got 2 big hugs. Saturday morning arrived, and it was time to take the kids to their riding lessons. Despite not seeing their mom for over a week, Mark and Glenda were excited to see Miss Darla. The lessons were my idea, which Jenny had opposed. Glenda loved horses, and Mark joined in to avoid being left out. Surprisingly, Mark became a better rider than Glenda. Darla Lamson, who owned the horse farm, was an excellent instructor and a cheerful person. She had a warm smile and an infectious laugh, and the kids adored her. "Where's Mrs. Wilson?" Darla asked as I stood at the corral fence. "Mrs. Wilson and I are getting a divorce," I replied honestly. "I'm sorry," Darla said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude." "No, it's okay. I just hope we can keep the kids in these lessons. My lawyer says the court will likely give her primary custody and me visitation rights. I'm fighting for joint custody, but it doesn't look good. Why? Once the divorce is final, Jenny will marry her rich lover and stay home. I'll have to hire babysitters, and I work for Brad, her lover, so I might lose my job soon. Is that Brad Coulson? Darla asked, narrowing her eyes. Yeah. Do you know him? I've met his lawyers. He wanted 2 acres of my land without paying for it, just to create a buffer. His lawyers filed motions, and I couldn't afford to fight. I finally agreed to give up the land if he paid my attorney's bill. The whole experience left a sour taste in my mouth for Brad. Brad is a piece of crap. My soon-to-be ex-wife chose him, and I'd like to see them both get what they deserve, I said. What will you do if Brad fires you? Darla asked. I'm a tax preparer and do bookkeeping on the side. I have 3 small business clients now. I'm saving money from my job and side business to help when I get laid off. I might have to sell the house and find an apartment to set up my business. If you can handle my accounting for the money I'm paying now, Darla said softly, I'd be happy to give you my business. I can't ask you to do that, I protested. If your accountant is doing a good job, there's no reason to change. I don't know if they're doing a good job. They were my father's accountants and handle payroll, taxes, and more for $2,000 a month. I don't know anyone there, and they take weeks to respond. I glanced at Glenda and Mark happily jumping their horses, then turned to Darla. Okay, if you're sure, I'll look at your books. If I can do it for the same amount, I'll take you on as a client. Darla laughed and led me to her office, where she showed me the current year's books and last year's tax return. The charges from her current firm were exorbitant. I can't do it for what they're charging, I said with a smirk. I can't charge you more than $750 a month and $2,000 for federal tax returns. No, Darla protested. I'm willing to pay that much. No, I don't work that way. Your current accountants are overcharging you. I will only take you on if I can offer a fair price. Wow, I didn't expect that, Darla said gratefully. That's going to help me a lot. Since I got the ranch, I've struggled to save. $1,250 a month will help a lot. Thank you, and Glenda and Mark's lessons will be free from now on. I can't ask you to do that, I protested. You didn't ask, Darla smiled. Getting Darla's ranch as a client was a big help, but the divorce was just starting to heat up. Despite Tom's assurance that things would get better, it wasn't happening. Every week, there were pictures of Brad and Jenny in the society section. It was unfair. Jenny's life seemed perfect, and mine was in the toilet. I was lonely and miserable. 2 weeks after DD Day, my day started well with a call from Harvey's Hardware wanting me to do their accounting. But then it turned into a disaster. I was fired, which wasn't surprising, but still depressing. Tom was preparing paperwork to file a wrongful termination suit with the EEOC, warning it could take years. Tom sent out a press release about my battle with Brad, which reportedly made my former boss furious. Things worsened when Tom called to inform me a judge had signed an order for joint custody. Jenny could live in the house, but she chose to pick up the kids after school and have me collect them in the evenings. It was a nightmare, having to see Jenny and Brad flaunting their happiness. The kids were confused, and I was depressed. Jenny's attorney filed motions to change the primary residence to Brad's house, claiming I denied visitation and tried to turn the kids against her. Tom filed a complaint stating I never denied visitation and suggested the judge interview the children. The judge decided the kids would stay with me for now, but required us to share custody every 2 weeks, shuttling the kids between homes. I realized I never really knew Jenny. The first time she picked up Glenda and Mark, she nervously asked me not to complicate the divorce and to let Brad adopt the kids in exchange for full visitation rights. I responded angrily, calling her a conniving cow and rejecting her offer. I called Tom immediately. He wasn't surprised and asked if I had installed cameras. I confirmed that I had cameras in key areas of the house, with more being installed outside the next day. Tom warned that Brad's lawyers might accuse me of mistreatment, but the cameras would help disprove those claims. The days Mark and Glenda spent with Jenny were hard. Brad had an active social life, and he and Jenny often appeared in the society section or on TV, usually with the kids. Jenny looked radiant, and the kids seemed happy, which crushed me. I couldn't compete with Brad's money and felt he was slowly stealing my kids. On the Monday of the 8th week after Jenny left, everything went downhill. I got a call from the school saying Mark and Glenda were absent. When I called Jenny, I asked, "Are the kids sick?" "No. Why would you think that?" she replied smugly. The The school called and said they were absent. Oh, that, Jenny said dismissively. I transferred them to Chesterton Primary School. It's a much better school, and it's only 5 minutes from my house. You can't do that, I growled. I can, and I did, she snarled and hung up. I called Tom frantically, but he explained, we can fight the transfer, but since the new school has a higher rating, the judge might allow it. Tom warned me to be vigilant, as this was just the beginning. He was right. On Tuesday, Tom filed a complaint about the school change. On Wednesday, Jenny's lawyers accused me of mistreating our daughter. An emergency hearing was scheduled, but I was temporarily forbidden from seeing my kids. Tom got a court order for more details on the accusation. At the hearing, the judge asked, Mr. Silas, what evidence do you have? The children told their mother, Jenny's lawyer replied. We acted to protect them, Tom spoke up. Your Honor, my client maintains that the accusation is a lie. We have video evidence from Able Security. Mr. Wilson installed cameras inside and outside his home because he feared such accusations. Mr. Silas objected. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. How do we know these videos aren't doctored? The judge sighed. Mr. Silas, the video is stored directly on Able Security's server and in the cloud. It's a secure system. I trust it. The videos were shown, clearly disproving the allegations. The judge warned Jenny's lawyer, false claims will not benefit your client. Tom assured me afterward, we have enough evidence to disprove their allegations. Just stay vigilant and trust the process. When the videos finished, the judge found nothing happened at the time Jenny indicated. After talking to the kids for 20 minutes, he sent them back to the hallway with the babysitter Jenny brought. I'll treat this as a misunderstanding, the judge said. But be warned, Mrs. Wilson, if it happens again, there will be consequences. Your Honor, Mr. Silas stood. While we're here, can you rule on the school change? Yes, the judge said slowly. I've reviewed both schools and agree with Mrs. Wilson that Chesterton Elementary is better. The children said they liked it. I lost a major battle that day. Mike, this ruling is bad, Tom said. It almost guarantees Jenny will get primary custody, but at least you won't go to jail and still have visitation rights. Yeah, but Jenny will find a way to ruin my visits. We'll complain and the court will tell her not to do it. Then she'll come up with something new to make my life hell. Isn't there anything I can do? Tom shook his head. Unless you move to the Chesterton School District and get married, I don't see the judge changing his mind. That Saturday, I took the kids to their riding lessons. Usually I enjoyed watching them ride and talking to Darla, but I was feeling down. My life was a mess. My wife left me, I lost my job, and now she was taking my kids. Hey, Mike, Darla said, sitting next to me. You look really depressed. What's going on? I explained that once the divorce was final, the kids probably wouldn't be coming to class anymore. To get joint custody, I would need to move to Chesterton and get married. But I had no prospects for marriage and couldn't afford to move. No offense, Mike, but your wife is a Class A cow, Darla said. She's been treating me like dirt ever since she signed your kids up. I wanted to tell her off, but I couldn't because of Glenda. I grinned sadly. No offense taken. I agree. We sat in silence for a moment before Darla had an idea. My house and half of this lot are in the Chesterton School District. Why don't you move in and we can tell everyone we're engaged? That way you'll be on equal footing with your wife. I stared at Darla, then started considering her proposal. It seemed like it might work. I asked Darla to come to my next meeting with Tom to explain the plan. Tom immediately rejected the idea. Mike, I know you're desperate, but a sham marriage won't work. They could give Jenny sole custody if they find out. I was disappointed, but Darla persisted. What if we do get married? We can't do that, I said. Hear me out, Darla insisted. Suppose we announce we're engaged and get married after your divorce. In the meantime, you move into my house. I have 3 bedrooms, so you can have your own. There's even a den for your accounting business. You could pay me a token amount of rent and sell your house. What do you say? Tom considered the idea. What you're proposing isn't necessarily illegal, but you'll need a real marriage ceremony. We'll have to draw up an agreement detailing Mike's financial contributions and a prenuptial agreement outlining your assets. If you divorce in less than a year, Brad and Jenny could prove it was a sham. I suggest at least 18 months. I'll settle for all of that, Darla said immediately. My head was spinning, unsure if it was the right decision. Darla, this is a big commitment for you. Anything to mess with Brad, she said with a smile. From 8 weeks to 18 months after DD Day, we signed the papers Tom prepared. Darla seemed thrilled, likely hating Brad as much as I did. We agreed to be married for at least 18 months and could divorce after that. Property division was clear, and I paid rent as my share of household expenses. The next day, Darla and I applied for a marriage license. We kept our marriage plans secret while Jenny and Brad announced theirs. Photos of their wedding details were in the society pages, with over 500 attendees expected. On the day of the final hearing, I was nervous. Despite feeling on equal footing, I knew fairness wasn't always the court's priority. Jenny's attorney, Mr. Silas, detailed my shortcomings. Mr. Wilson is unemployed, struggles to pay his bills, and doesn't live in the Chesterton School District. We also have concerns about his mental state. Objection, Tom shouted, standing up. The judge gave Mr. Silas a hard look. Do you have evidence that Mr. Wilson's state of mind is a danger to the children? Not really, Your Honor, Mr. Silas replied. Then don't, the judge snapped. Mr. Silas continued. Jenny Wilson and Brad Coulson plan to marry. Mr. Coulson's home is in the Chesterton School District, and he has considerable means. Mrs. Wilson will be a stay-at-home mother. We believe sole custody is in the children's best interest. Tom stood up. Mr. Wilson has no problem paying his bills. Here's his financial statement proving he can care for his children. Any financial difficulties are due to Mr. Coulson unfairly firing him. We filed a lawsuit with the EEOC and expect a favorable settlement. Mr. Wilson has started his own accounting firm, which is profitable and growing. He is also engaged to Darla Lamson and now lives in her home in the Chesterton School District. We request Mr. Wilson be awarded primary or at least joint custody. As Tom sat down, I glanced at Jenny, who looked stunned. Brad's face was red with anger, and Mr. Silas appeared irritated. We had blindsided them. I'd like to talk to the kids before I make a ruling, the judge said. My stomach knotted as the judge spoke to the kids for 20 minutes. They looked confused when they came out, but they smiled and waved at me, which reassured me. Making a custody decision when both parents love their children is the most difficult part of this job, the judge began. In the end, I have to do what is best for the children. The judge paused, pulling a piece of paper from a folder. Jenny, Brad, and Mr. Silas smiled, and my heart sank. As I said, I have to act in the best interest of the children, the judge continued. Both parents can provide for the children and allow them to attend the same school. The deciding factor was what the children wanted. They want to spend time with both parents. Therefore, I am granting joint custody. The children will spend 2 weeks with each parent, starting this Sunday with Mrs. Wilson. Mr. Wilson will pick them up 2 weeks later. The transfer will take place by 2 p.m. every other Sunday. Are there any other questions? When no one spoke, the judge announced, the divorce will be final in 30 days, and tapped the gavel. We had already agreed to split everything 50-50, and the house was up for sale. After expenses, Jenny and I would each get $6,000. While that was nothing to Jenny, it was extra money for me. I felt jubilant, but tried to remain calm. In the hallway, I hugged the kids. Then I approached Jenny and Brad, who were berating Mr. Silas about the judge's decision. Sorry, Jenny, I said with a smirk. Just wanted to clarify when I can pick up the kids. 2 weeks from Sunday. That's not the end of it, idiot, Brad growled. Whatever, Brad. I just want to know when I can pick up the kids. We can meet at a neutral location like McDonald's if needed. The judge said 2 p.m., idiot. And that's how it will be until our lawyers overturn the ruling, Jenny snarled. Marrying Miss Piggy to get joint custody, really? You're just a chatterbox. You're marrying your grandfather, you little crap, I retorted. Go outside and I'll punch you to the sidewalk, yelled Brad. I wasn't going to fight Brad, but I was pissed. Don't you need your cane first? I taunted. Brad lunged at me, but I stepped back. Jenny grabbed Brad's arm and Mr. Silas stepped between us. Mr. Coulson, please, if you attack Mr. Wilson, the court can grant him sole custody. Please, Brad, Jenny pleaded. Suddenly, I realized my kids were clinging to my leg, yelling, Don't hurt our daddy! Jenny glared at me, then turned to the kids. It's okay, kids. Mr. Coulson and Daddy were just fooling around. Let's go get some ice cream. As they left, I said, I'll be there at 2 p.m., 2 weeks from Sunday. Jenny only glanced at me. At the appointed time, I picked up the kids and we went to a movie and dinner with Darla. Brad's lawyers couldn't overturn anything. The kids loved living on the ranch with Darla, riding horses and cooking with her. Jenny had struggled to boil water, so this was a welcome change. 30 days after the judge's ruling, Darla and I married at the courthouse with the children present. Darla's friend and Tom were our witnesses. I kissed Darla, who looked genuinely happy. A week later, Jenny and Brad's wedding was all over the society papers. Jenny looked ecstatic, but the happiness on my children's faces struck me deeply. As the weeks passed, I hoped Tom's prediction about the pain subsiding would come true. Some days were less painful, but nights were lonely and agonizing. For the first 6 months, I obsessed over getting revenge, but couldn't think of anything without risking jail. Jenny's parents already knew about her, and poisoning my children's minds against their mother was unthinkable. My pain remained acute, worsened by my children's contentment with the new arrangement. They loved Brad's house, raving about the pool, hot tub, game room, tennis court, and mini movie studio. 3 months after the divorce, Jenny began manipulating Glenda and Mark against me, subtly implying I was a bad father for not spending as much money. When they told me this, I was filled with sadness and anger. Darla was furious and insisted we talk to the kids. The next time they came over, I sat them down. "Do you guys think I'm a bad dad because I don't spend as much money on you as Brad and Mom do?" "That's what Mom says," Mark replied uncertainly. "Mark, Mr. Coulson is very rich, which is why your mom married him. I can't buy you everything they can. Compared to him, I'm poor. All I can do is love you. If gifts are important to you, I won't make you come to the ranch anymore." Glenda started crying. "No, Daddy, I want to be with you too." "Me neither," Mark said, tears in his eyes. When the kids returned to Jenny, she was furious. She came to the ranch and snapped, "Why are Mark and Glenda mad at me for picking on their poor daddy?" "Back off, Jenny," I said, and shut the door in her face. Jenny began planning special trips for the kids, like Disneyland, which they begged to go to. This happened every few months, frustrating me. Darla suggested we switch weeks. When Jenny said no, the kids were upset with her, not me. During this stressful time, Darla, John, and Alma Smith supported me. Jenny didn't invite her parents to her wedding, so I invited them to the ranch for a barbecue instead. John, a decorated Vietnam veteran, and Alma stayed the weekend. John taught me to ride horses, and we often invited them over when the kids were with me. Jenny's treatment of her parents broke my heart, but at least Mark and Glenda got to know them. I read many books on divorce and co-parenting. One valuable piece of advice was to gift experiences instead of things. Darla and I took the kids to local attractions, hiking, bowling, and even miniature golf. Darla organized a mini rodeo with a local charity, involving the kids in planning. They were excited to lead the parade and refused Jenny's offer to take them to Disneyland, not wanting to miss their first rodeo. During the first year after the divorce, Jenny continued trying to win the kids' affection, making snide remarks about me and convincing them to spend time with her and Brad. Though it hurt, I never complained. Every night they were with me, I read to them, continuing until 5th grade. Living with Darla, even platonically, was pleasant. She was always cheerful and kind, and working from her den helped grow my accounting business. By the end of the first year, I was earning about 70% of my previous salary. Jenny continued trying to outshine me in the kids' eyes, but Brad eventually lost interest in adopting them and began monopolizing Jenny's time. When Brad traveled overseas, Jenny insisted on taking the kids. Initially, I was against it, fearing kidnapping, but Darla convinced me that Brad wouldn't risk the scandal. The kids loved the trips and talked about them for days. Eventually, Jenny even sent them back alone when Brad's trip was extended. The first anniversary of the divorce passed unnoticed until Tom called, reminding me. Surprisingly, I felt almost no pain or anger. Jenny had become just an unpleasant memory. Feeling guilty for not acknowledging the anniversary, I bought Darla flowers and took her to dinner, which made her radiant. As we approached the 18-month mark, Darla became moody. I decided to find a new place, not wanting to take chances with custody. I found a townhouse in the Chesterton School District with 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a 1-car garage. I didn't want to move, loving life on the ranch and my business set up there. Darla had expanded the ranch with my advice, adding 200 more acres, trails, summer camps, and cabins for adults. Her business thrived, earning her almost $200,000 a year. My own business grew, and I even had a secretary and bookkeeper. Additionally, I settled the wrongful termination lawsuit against Brad's company for $250,000, giving half to Tom and saving the rest. The night before the 18th month, I spoke to Darla while the kids were with Jenny. "Darla, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You saved me when I thought I would lose Mark and Glenda. Our contract ends tomorrow, so I found a place to rent temporarily. I hope it's okay if I use the den for another month until my office is ready. I didn't expect her reaction. Darla burst into tears and ran to her bedroom. Stunned, I knocked on her door, but she didn't answer. That night, I felt deep anxiety. Although we were married, we had never been close. I cared deeply for her, but I had kept my distance, fearing to offend her. Except for occasional hugs or kisses on the cheek, we went our separate ways. Around midnight, a violent thunderstorm broke out. Lightning struck close to the house, waking me up. My bedroom door opened and Darla slipped in. "Mike, I'm terrified of thunderstorms," she whimpered. "Can I sleep with you?" "Sure," I said, lifting the blanket. Darla snuggled up against me, shivering and undressed. "I'm very afraid of thunder and lightning," she whispered. I hugged her tightly. "Please, Mike, I know you don't love me, but I need you to make love to me at least once before you leave." In that moment, I realized my deep feelings for Darla. It wasn't the same love I had felt for Jenny, but a mature friendship that had grown into something more over 18 months. Making love to Darla that night completed my healing. "Darla, I don't know if it's love, but I know I never want to leave you. At first, I thought we were just friends, but my feelings grew over the months. I wanted more, but was afraid you didn't feel the same." "Oh, Mike, I loved you almost from the start. When Jenny left you and we pretended to be married, I thought I had a chance. But when you said you were leaving, I was devastated. I love you so much. Please give me a chance." "I'll only leave if you kick me out," I said, kissing her gently. "This is my home, and you are my wife, now and forever." 18 months to 10 years later, we woke up to a sunny day. I had a new perspective on my life. Despite the betrayal, I had come out in a better situation. The pain and anger were gone, and Jenny was just an unpleasant memory. What started as a sham marriage was now real and loving. I decided Darla and I needed a honeymoon and asked where she wanted to go. Instead of Paris or Hawaii, Darla chose Montana. "Why Montana?" I asked. "My daddy loved working on a ranch there and always told me stories about it. I always wanted to see it, but didn't want to go alone." "Why didn't he buy a ranch in Montana?" "He hated winters." We spent 2 weeks in Montana, including a week at a working ranch. Darla got many ideas for her ranch, but the best part was our nights together. When we returned, the kids told us Jenny and Brad had left them with a nanny while they traveled to Europe. The kids were unhappy with the strict nanny. When Jenny picked up the kids, I asked her about it. "Jenny, the kids told me you and Brad went to Europe and left them with a nanny." "That's none of your business, Mike. Don't start." "I'm not trying to pick a fight. If you have to travel, we'd love to take the kids rather than hire a nanny. We were traveling this time, so we couldn't help. I'm just saying it's an option." "The custody agreement is clear. 2 weeks here and 2 weeks at Brad and my house," Jenny said, then told the kids to get in the car. The next day, I told Tom about my conversation with Jenny and my proposal. He advised waiting to see if it happened again. 6 weeks later, it did. Tom filed for a custody modification. Jenny called me, outraged, saying she would never agree to changes. Tom warned the court might side with her, but I wanted to try. At the hearing, Jenny's attorney, Mr. Silas, seemed displeased to be there, and Brad wasn't present, only Jenny. "Your Honor, this is a waste of the court's time," Mr. Silas said. "The custody agreement has been working for almost 2 years. My client sees no reason to change anything." "Your Honor, we're only trying to do what's best for the children," Tom objected and laid out his arguments. "We understand Mr. Coulson travels frequently and wants his wife to accompany him. We are simply asking Mrs. Coulson to allow the children to stay with their father while she is away. If she returns before the 2 weeks are up, the children will be returned to her residence at her convenience." "Mr. Silas, do you have anything to add?" the judge asked. "The custody agreement is working, and Mrs. Coulson prefers it unchanged." The judge nodded. "Although I agree the current agreement is working, it makes no sense to deny the children their father's company if the mother is away. I grant Mr. Wilson's motion to modify the custody agreement accordingly." I was stunned by the quick decision and even more surprised it was in my favor. Seeing Jenny's anger, I knew trouble was brewing. "Why are you such a pain in the back?" Jenny asked me in the hallway. "Jenny, what's the problem? You're not around, so why can't the kids stay with me? It's better for them than sitting with that strict nanny you hired." "Screw you, Mike," she hissed and walked away. "What's her problem?" I asked Tom. "I think Jenny hates not being in control and fears the kids will love you more," he replied. "You're probably right," I sighed. "Jenny keeps trying to turn the kids against me and makes me wait when I pick them up. But she has everything she wants, so why this pettiness?" "Because she can," Tom said with a smile. "Come buy me lunch." 2 years after that night, Darla and I had a baby girl named Wendy. 18 months later, we had a boy named Stephen. Darla was a wonderful mother, and Glenda and Mark became protective of their new siblings. The next 5 years flew by. During that time, I had Mark and Glenda 70–80% of the time, as Jenny and Brad traveled frequently. Jenny had little contact with her parents, who only visited once or twice a year. They were never invited to stay at Brad and Jenny's house. On the other hand, Darla and I invited John and Alma almost every weekend. The kids loved having them over, and I enjoyed their company. John shared stories about his varied occupations and service in Vietnam, which I found fascinating. It bothered me that Jenny ignored her parents, and I knew it hurt them. When I tried to talk to Jenny about it, she told me to mind my own business. I continued to follow Jenny and Brad in the social pages. The kids liked seeing pictures of their mother in the newspaper. Initially, I thought their marriage would dissolve, but over the years, they seemed very happy. According to Mark and Glenda, life at Brad's house was pleasant, and they even liked Brad. He was nice to them and bought them lots of things, which the kids always appreciated. About 8 years after our divorce, Alma passed away from cancer. She spent her last days with us at the ranch. Her funeral was held locally, and many attended. There is a private cemetery on the ranch dating back to the 1870s, and John asked if Alma could be buried there. We agreed and also promised John he could be buried next to her. I wasn't sure if Jenny would attend the funeral, but she showed up with Brad. She wore a dark blue dress and sunglasses, and Brad's appearance had changed. His hair was thinning and graying, and he had a hint of a potbelly. John greeted Jenny awkwardly, but then they hugged. Brad shook John's hand and offered condolences. Mark and Glenda, who had been crying, hugged their mother. Brad nodded and smirked at me, expecting a reaction, but I smiled and shook his hand. When we tried to sit in the front pew, there wasn't enough room, so I suggested Brad and I sit in the second pew. Brad wasn't happy, especially when John insisted I sit next to him. Darla took my place in the second pew with Brad. During the service, I heard Brad grumbling, and Darla hissed something at him. Brad then got up and left. After the service, John invited Jenny and Brad to the ranch for the burial and meal, but Jenny declined, citing a plane to catch. Afterward, I asked Darla what had happened with Brad. "He was mad because you were sitting in the front row with his wife," she said, "but I told him to shut up because the world doesn't revolve around him." Darla smiled mischievously. "I think he was insulted." We laughed about it, but we shouldn't have. Brad is vindictive. 2 weeks later, he began another land grab, claiming 10 acres adjacent to his allotment. His attorneys discovered a clerical error that excluded the parcel from the ranch's single ownership. Brad paid the taxes and demanded a tax return. Darla was upset and considered signing the deed. "Absolutely not," I replied. "Brad is bullying you for insulting him. Fight back." The court sided with Darla, stating the county was responsible for the tax error and limiting the tax payment period to 5 years. After that, I rarely saw Brad in person, only on social media. Jenny and Brad traveled frequently, and I mostly picked up the kids from their staff. The kids spent about 9 months a year with me, as they grew to hate going back to their mother's house. Brad had become moody, and Jenny was often absent. Then, news broke that Brad had filed for divorce from Jenny. It shocked me and confused the kids. A few weeks later, we learned Brad had caught Jenny cheating with billionaire Thad DeMont. This explained everything. Thad was not only richer than Brad, but also younger. Darla and I couldn't help but be amused by this turn of events. Shortly after Brad and Jenny's divorce, Jenny married Tad. This worked out well for me since Tad didn't live in the Chesterton School District, meaning Glenda and Mark lived with Darla and me full-time. After Alma died, I convinced John to sell his house and move in with us. Darla hired him for ranch renovations, and we expanded the house for a dining room and my bookkeeping business. This led to another fight with Brad, who tried to block our building permit. Despite his efforts, we got the permit, and John did most of the construction work. About a year after Jenny married Tad, she filed for divorce again. Rumors spread that Tad had cheated on her with an 18-year-old, and another rumor, which I later confirmed, said Tad married Jenny just to spite Brad. From 10 to 30 years after that night with Darla, life had its ups and downs. Mark was in a car accident but survived with minor injuries. John had a mild stroke but recovered well with therapy. I had a triple bypass surgery after Darla insisted I see a doctor for my persistent health issues. Despite these challenges, my love for Darla only grew. When Darla asked if I ever thought about getting back with Jenny, I reassured her, "Darla, never. Jenny is my past, and you are my present and future. I love you, and that's never going to change." One day, I encountered Brad in a doctor's waiting room. He looked frail and admitted, "You won." He explained he truly loved Jenny and now understood my pain when she left me. Brad revealed he had stage 4 cancer and apologized for pursuing Jenny while she was married to me. I forgave him, realizing my hatred had turned to pity. Brad died 5 months later. Darla and I attended his funeral, which was sparsely attended. Jenny, upset and accusing me of gloating, confronted me. "You had to come and gloat, didn't you?" I responded angrily. "You're a hypocrite. You left him for someone richer, and now you cry crocodile tears. Brad apologized to me months ago. Did you ever apologize to him for setting him up?" I didn't wait for her response. Darla and I left. On the drive home, after a tense silence, Darla lightened the mood by asking, "Who pooped in your crispy crumbs this morning?" I burst into laughter, appreciating her ability to make me laugh even in tough times. When Brad's will became public, I was surprised. He left most of his fortune to charity and his alma mater, but also left $2 million to Jenny. With inheritances from 2 wealthy husbands, Jenny was doing well. She bought an apartment near the ranch and tried to reconnect with the kids, but they found her place boring and didn't want to visit. I encouraged them to make an effort, but eventually Jenny gave up and found a new boyfriend. She frequently changed boyfriends, and the kids were happy not to spend time at her place. If they were happy, I was happy. I was very proud of our kids. Mark graduated from Georgia Tech with an engineering degree and works in Austin. He married Cindy Stubbins, also an engineer, and they have 2 daughters. Glenda became a veterinarian after attending Texas A&M. She returned home, worked locally, and eventually opened her own practice. She married Todd Amberson, another vet, and they have 2 boys and a girl. My grandchildren spend more time at the ranch than at home, and they adore Jenny's dad, John. Our daughter Alma graduated from the University of Texas with a teaching degree and now teaches 3rd grade at Chesterton Elementary. She married Jerry, a chemistry teacher at Marion Middle School, and they are expecting their first child soon. I love having grandchildren. They are a joy to spoil. Mark also married a lovely girl named Sally, whom he met on vacation. They have 3 children and are expecting a 4th. Despite her petite size, Sally has no trouble carrying their children. The years flew by, and Darla and I celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary. I rarely saw Jenny, and the kids had little contact with her. Time had caught up with her. She was no longer the beauty she once was, and hadn't had a boyfriend in years. She called her dad occasionally, but their conversations were short, and John was often depressed. He admitted he didn't know what to say to her, which saddened me. As Christmas approached, I went to the mall to shop. Knowing I'm terrible at picking gifts, I bought gift cards instead. After finishing my shopping, I went to the food court for a Chick-fil-A sandwich and lemonade. I noticed Jenny sitting alone, watching families pass by. She had gained weight and had visible age spots and wrinkles. Despite still being attractive for her age, the loneliness in her eyes was evident. I decided to join her. "Hey, mind if I join you?" I asked, placing my sandwich and drink on the table. "What do you want?" snapped Jenny. I was surprised by her hostility. I picked up my sandwich and drink. "I don't need anything. I just wanted to say hi. Sorry for bothering you. I'll find another table." A look of pain crossed Jenny's face. "No, I'm sorry. The holidays bring out the worst in me. Please, have a seat. I want some company." "What brings you to the mall? Christmas shopping?" I asked, taking a bite of my sandwich. "Mike, I haven't done Christmas shopping since Brad and I divorced. I just send checks, and the kids appreciate them for the grandkids' college funds." "I know," Jenny replied, watching a couple with a baby stroller. "They tell me in thank you notes." "So why are you at the mall? You never like shopping." "I just wanted to be around people," Jenny replied, watching a couple wrangle their kids. "Everyone in my house is gone for the holidays." "And what are you doing for Christmas? Not sitting alone in your apartment, right?" "Of course not," Jenny replied. "I have reservations at Chez Francesca and plan to watch the new Tom Hanks movie." "No, you're coming to the ranch for Christmas. Your kids and grandkids will be there, and your dad too. It'll be fun." "I can't do that. I'll be an inconvenience." "Nonsense," I said, picking up my trash. "You're coming. Be there by 7 to see the grandkids open presents. Dinner is at 3. Darla wasn't pleased when I told her Jenny was coming for Christmas. "Why did you invite her?" she asked, her eyes flashing with jealousy. I hugged and kissed her. "Is my wife jealous? Stop it, Mike. I'm serious. Jenny will make everyone feel awkward." "That's what she said, but I couldn't let her spend the day alone." "What's up with Jenny?" John asked, entering the room. "I invited Jenny for Christmas," I told the man I considered my second father. "She said she was coming." John's eyes lit up, and Darla noticed. "Jenny tried to excuse herself, but I didn't take no for an answer. Whether she comes is up to her." The happiness in John's eyes faded, but was replaced by hope. On Christmas Day, Jenny didn't come to watch the grandchildren open presents or for dinner. I realized she wasn't coming, and John looked downcast, sitting quietly. I sent my youngest granddaughter, Christy, to play a game with him, and soon he was on the floor playing Candyland. At 5:30, I was surprised to hear the doorbell. Jenny stood there, dressed as if she were going out to dinner. "Hi," I said kindly. I was beginning to lose hope. "I still think it might be a mistake," she said, uncertain. "No, it's not," I assured her. "You missed dinner, but we're about to serve dessert. Or I can heat up a plate of leftovers for you." "No, dessert sounds lovely," Jenny said as I walked her inside. "Hey, everyone," I announced. "Look who I found. Jenny's here for dessert." The grandkids swarmed her, picking teams for a game. Mark and Glenda hugged and kissed their mom, wishing her a Merry Christmas. All the kids hugged her, and to my surprise, Darla did too. The evening went pleasantly. Jenny was nervous at first, but relaxed when she realized she was the only one feeling awkward. It was touching to see Jenny and her father talking and laughing. Despite her calm demeanor, Jenny still seemed unsure about being in Darla and my house. I observed her from time to time, noting she was still attractive, but my feelings for her had changed. She was just the mother of my 2 children. After the grandchildren settled down, their parents decided to use the hot tub. It was 34 degrees outside, so Darla, Jenny, and I stayed inside. John tried the hot tub, but quickly returned, saying it was too cold. I got us drinks, and we sat by the fireplace with the Christmas tree blinking. For 15 minutes, we watched the flames in silence. At one point, I noticed tears streaming down Jenny's face. "Are you okay?" I asked, not sure why Jenny was crying. "I'll be fine," Jenny replied in a thin voice, wiping away the tears. Neither Darla nor I mentioned her tears, letting the silence envelop us again. After 5 more minutes, Jenny spoke. "I almost didn't come," she said, staring at the fire. "I was afraid I'd confirm what I already knew. I made a mess of my life." "Oh, I think you're being too hard on yourself," Darla said. "I saw pictures of you and Brad, and it was clear you loved him. The same with Thad. Neither marriage worked out, but 50% of marriages end in divorce anyway. I did love Brad at first, though I still loved you, Mike. But I loved his money and power more. We were good together for years, but I let him separate me from my children. As he got older, health problems affected him in bed. He became frustrated and angry. I started cheating on Brad about 6 months before dating Thad. I saw the same pain and hatred in Brad's eyes that I saw in yours, Mike. Almost from the start, I suspected Thad of cheating on me. When I caught him, he laughed and said he only married me to spite Brad. I was devastated and realized how you and Brad felt. After Thad, I decided to enjoy life without marriage. I had more than enough money for it, so I had one loveless affair after another. That was about as much of an apology as Jenny could offer. After a few moments of silence, Jenny drained her glass and stood up. "I have to go." Darla and I tried to convince her to stay the night, but she refused. John and I walked her to the car. Her father hugged her tightly and told her he loved her. Jenny's tears flowed again as she wiped them away. Before getting in the car, she hugged me and said, "Thank you." Then she left. I don't know what the next few years will bring. I believe Jenny truly regrets many of her life choices. Whether she reunites with her family is her choice. The house is quiet now, with only the occasional pop or crackle from the fireplace. I couldn't help but think about how sad my ex-wife was, and yes, I felt sorry for her. I regretted all the time I wasted trying to get back at Jenny and Brad. As I watched the fire dance, I remembered the Bible verse. "The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the knowledgeable, but time and chance happen to them all." Time proved to be a true retribution.